In this video, we're going to take a look at the configuration of a simple vCenter environment. In vSphere 5.1, we actually need a few different components to be installed, and the installation's a little bit different than it was in previous versions. We now have a so-called single sign-on service. vCenter actually includes its own authentication services so that if you want to integrate with the local Active Directory, it's easy to do that. But if you need to integrate with multiple Active Directories or even other directory sources, it's also much easier to do that than we would have before, where we would have been dependent on the local Active Directory that we were part of. Potentially, we may need to distribute this onto different systems. Maybe the single sign-on service is going to support multiple vCenter servers. Maybe we even want to apply some high availability to that. But in this case, we're just going to keep it straightforward. So in this virtual machine, I've already presented the vCenter media, or what used to be called virtual infrastructure. So you see this Vim entry here, and I got this ISO off of VMware's evaluation site. I'm just going to go ahead and open the DVD, and we get into the vCenter installer. In this one, we're going to take a look just at the inventory and the vCenter server services. So the easiest way to get all those three things installed together is to run the vCenter simple install process. We could install these all individually on the local server, or we could potentially distribute these onto other servers that I was mentioning. So in this case, I'm going to run through the simple install, and I'm just going to click install here. It goes into the single sign-on service, then it's going to give us the inventory service, and then it's going to give us the vCenter service. So I'll just go through the first couple of screens of the wizard here and accept the license agreements and the patent list and so on. Now, in this case, it's asking me for a password. This is admin@system-domain. System-domain is actually the single sign-on service provider, and admin is the first user in it. Potentially, we can go in and create additional users in the single sign-on service, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to give it the password I've been using everywhere else. So this gives me the option to install a local SQL Server 2008 R2 Express instance, or use a database that we had already set up somewhere else. In this case, I'll just go ahead and do a local installation of Express. Now, Express has a lot of limitations, so that may not be the most appropriate, but for my demo environment here, it's just fine. So it's actually going to require a couple of database users to be set up for the encryption and some of the other services that are here. So we see we have a DBA user and also a regular user account. I'm just going to use the same passwords that I've been using. So it's asking for the local server name. In this case, this is actually a different virtual center from the one that I used for the various rest of the videos. So through the rest of the course, you'll see it's actually VC-01 that I'm going to be using. In this case, I'm going to do VC-02. So this is fine, but if I had multiple IP addresses or anything like that, then we may need to specify exactly which one we want to use. Now, it's trying to do a reverse DNS lookup, which I haven't set up, but that's okay. Just says some features might not work, but for what I'm doing, it'll actually work just fine. So you'll see it also wants to install the Security Support Provider Interface Service, which is actually where it integrates with the Windows authentication services. In this case, the network service account is fine. So I have the opportunity to change the HTTPS port for single sign-on. I'm not going to bother doing that. I'm just going to leave that at the defaults. And now it's going through the installation of SQL Server Express. Okay, so now that the single sign-on service has been installed, we've come to the inventory service. Now, in this case, I already did have all these components installed on this server. It says, hey, I've already found a database for your inventory service. I could potentially just use it, if I was doing a disaster recovery or something like that. But in this case, I want to replace it and have it start again. So I'm just going to go ahead with that. Now, in this case, I don't have a license key, so I'm just going to leave it blank and move on for evaluation mode. So once again, the inventory service also requires its own database. And then we also can provide the service account details where the vCenter service is going to run. In this case, I'm just going to tell it to use the local system account. I'm okay with that. It's complaining about the reverse lookup of the name, but that's okay. Now we can customize all the various ports that are going to be used here for the actual vCenter service. Really not much reason for me to do that, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave it as is. But you'll notice there is this option, increase the number of available ephemeral ports. If you're going to be supporting more than 2,000 powered on virtual machines at once through this vCenter, then we can go ahead and turn that on. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and click next. Now, it's also asking us about the inventory size that we expect to have. This is actually going to tune the memory heap size for the Java virtual machine because there is a fair amount of Java behind the scenes with vCenter. We've got an option for small, less than 100 hosts or 1,000 virtual machines, which definitely is what I'll have here. But as we can see, we also go all the way to large. more than 400 hosts or 4,000 virtual machines. If your environment grows, there are some ways to go in and tune this later, but for now, I'm just going to go ahead and click next. So at this point, we have the single sign-on service installed. The inventory service has also been installed and it already found its database. We're doing the vCenter installation now. I'm not going to get prompted for anything else. So I think what I'm going to do is let this installation finish. Our next step with vCenter is going to be connecting to it with the vSphere client and then connecting an ESXi host to vCenter.